3 months after her divorce was finalized, Sarah started doing something strange. Every morning at 6 a.m., she'd sit in her kitchen and practice having conversations with herself, not because she was lonely, but because she realized she didn't know how to make decisions anymore without checking with someone first. Should I buy this? Should I go here? Should I say yes? For 12 years, every choice went through a filter called we. Now that filter was gone, and her brain literally didn't know how to function. This is what divorce actually does to your psychology, and it's way more complex than just feeling sad. When people think about divorce, they think about the obvious stuff: the crying, the anger, the loneliness, the late-night spiral where you question everything. And yeah, all of that happens. But there's a whole layer of psychological changes that happen beneath the surface that most people never talk about. Changes that affect how you think, how you trust, how you see yourself, and how you move through the world. I'm talking about the mental rewiring that happens when you go from married to single after years or decades of partnership. And if you've never been through it, you probably can't imagine what it feels like. If you have been through it, you're probably nodding your head right now because you know exactly what I'm about to say. So let's break down what actually happens inside the mind of someone who just got divorced. The real psychology, not the surface level stuff. The first thing that hits people after divorce is something psychologists call decision fatigue amplification. Sounds complicated, but here's what it actually means. When you're married or in a long-term relationship, thousands of tiny decisions get made jointly or automatically. What to eat for dinner, what to watch, when to go to bed, how to spend the weekend, where to go on vacation. Your brain gets used to this shared decision-making process. It becomes efficient, automatic. You don't even think about it. Then divorce happens, and suddenly every single decision lands entirely. And your brain, which was used to sharing that cognitive load, gets completely overwhelmed. This is why newly divorced people often can't decide what to eat and end up eating nothing. Spend 45 minutes choosing a movie and then don't watch anything. Stand in the grocery store staring at cereal boxes like they're trying to decode ancient hieroglyphics. It looks like indecision, but it's actually your brain adjusting to carrying 100% of the decision-making weight after years of it being split. And here's the twist. Even if you were the one making most decisions in the marriage, your brain still had a reference point. You were deciding for us. Now you're deciding for me. And that shift is more jarring than people realize. Here's something weird that happens that people rarely admit out loud. After divorce, your ex becomes a ghost in your daily life. Not literally, obviously, but psychologically, they're still there. You'll be doing something completely normal, making coffee, scrolling your phone, driving to work, and suddenly you'll think, oh, I should tell them about this. Then you remember, you can't. They're not your person anymore. Or you'll have a bad day and instinctively reach for your phone to text them. Then you stop yourself. Or you'll see something funny and think, they'd love this. Then the reality hits you again. Psychologists call this phantom relationship syndrome. Your brain built neural pathways around this person for years. Thousands of moments where they were your first thought, your first call, your automatic share. Those pathways don't disappear overnight just because the relationship ended. Your brain keeps running the old program, even though the context has completely changed. It's like muscle memory, but for emotional connection. And every time it happens, you experience a micro grief. A tiny reminder that they're gone, that the life you built together is over. This can go on for months, sometimes years, not because you want them back, but because your brain is slowly, painfully rewiring itself around their absence. Now let's talk about something that catches people completely off guard: the social fallout. When you get divorced, you don't just lose a partner, you lose an entire social ecosystem. Mutual friends suddenly become awkward. They don't know whose side to be on. They don't know who to invite to things. They don't know what's safe to talk about. Some friends disappear completely, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to handle the situation. Some friends pick sides, and if they don't pick yours, that's a whole other layer of loss. Family dynamics shift. In-laws who became your family are suddenly strangers again. Holidays get complicated. Events get divided up. And your own family, even if they're supportive, might say things like, "I never liked them anyway," or "You're better off," when what you really need is just someone to sit with the complexity of it. Your entire social identity was built around being part of a couple. Sarah and Mike, the Johnsons, my husband and I. Now you're just you, and you have to rebuild your social identity from scratch. This is why so many newly divorced people either completely isolate or suddenly become extremely social. They're either protecting themselves from the awkwardness or desperately trying to create a new social identity. Both are coping mechanisms. Neither is wrong. Real question: if you've been through divorce, what surprised you most about how other people reacted to it? Did people show up in ways you didn't expect or disappoint you? Drop your experience in the comments. Here's where things get really psychological. After divorce, your brain starts doing something strange with memory. It begins distorting the past to make sense of the present. If you initiated the divorce, your brain will often emphasize all the negative memories. It'll highlight every fight, every disappointment, every red flag you ignored. It does this to justify your decision, to convince you that you made the right choice. If you didn't want the divorce, your brain does the opposite. It romanticizes the past. It remembers the good times in vivid detail and downplays the problems. It does this because it's trying to make sense of a loss that feels senseless. This is called retrospective reconstruction, and it happens completely unconsciously. You're not lying to yourself. Your brain is genuinely rewriting the story to create a narrative that your psyche can handle. This is why two people from the same marriage can have completely different versions of what that marriage was like. Both people believe they're telling the truth, and in a way, they are. They're telling their brain's truth. The dangerous part? You can get stuck in either version. If you only remember the bad, you might carry unnecessary bitterness and suspicion into future relationships. If you only remember the good, you might spend years wondering what if, and never fully move forward. The healthiest thing you can do is recognize that your memory right now is not objective. It's protective. And that's okay. But it's not the whole truth. Let's talk about money, because this is a massive psychological factor that people underestimate. Divorce doesn't just split assets, it splits your entire financial identity. If you were the primary earner, you might feel guilty about the split or resentful about support payments. If you weren't, you might feel vulnerable, dependent, or terrified about your financial future. But beyond the practical stuff, there's a psychological shift that happens. Your spending habits were built around a shared life, shared goals, shared responsibilities, shared dreams. Now those goals are gone. And your brain has to completely recalibrate what money means. Some people become extremely frugal, almost paranoid about finances. They're trying to regain control and security. Some people do the opposite. They spend recklessly, make impulsive purchases, take trips they can't afford. They're trying to prove they don't need their ex to have a good life. Both are psychological responses to the loss of financial partnership and the uncertainty of building a financial future alone. Money stops being just money. It becomes a symbol of independence, security, freedom, or failure, depending on how your brain is processing the divorce. Here's something that affects nearly everyone, but gets talked about way less than it should. Sleep becomes a nightmare after divorce. Not just "I'm sad so I can't sleep." I'm talking about a complete disruption of your sleep architecture. Your brain is processing massive amounts of emotional information, trying to make sense of enormous life changes, running threat assessments constantly, and dealing with the absence of someone who was physically there for years. If you slept next to someone for a long time, your nervous system adapted to their presence. The sound of their breathing, the warmth of their body, the predictable rhythm of sleeping next to another person. When that's gone, your brain treats it like a danger signal. Something's missing, something's wrong, stay alert. This is why newly divorced people often wake up multiple times a night, have vivid, disturbing dreams about their ex, experience anxiety attacks at 3 a.m., feel exhausted no matter how much they sleep. Your brain is literally trying to process trauma while you're unconscious, and it's doing a terrible job of it. This sleep disruption then affects everything else: your mood, your decision-making, their immune system, their ability to cope. And most people don't connect it to the divorce. They just think they're not sleeping well and don't realize their nervous system is in crisis mode. Eventually, most people start thinking about dating again. And this is where the psychology gets really messy. You want connection. You want to feel desired again. You want proof that you're still attractive, still worthy, still capable of being loved. But at the same time, you're terrified. Because the last time you trusted someone with your heart, it ended in devastation. So you end up in this psychological paradox. You download dating apps but feel sick to your stomach swiping. You go on dates but constantly compare them to your ex. You meet someone interesting but sabotage it because your brain screams, danger. You did this before and look how it ended. You're simultaneously desperate for connection and terrified of it. This is why post-divorce dating is so chaotic. You're not actually ready, but you feel like you should be. You're not actually healed, but you're tired of being alone. And here's what makes it worse. Society puts pressure on you to move on, to get back out there, to prove you're okay. So you rush into dating before you've done the internal work. And then you either get hurt again or hurt someone else because you're still carrying all the unprocessed pain from your divorce. The healthiest thing? Give yourself permission to not be ready. To take as long as you need to heal first, date later. But that's not what most people do. Because loneliness is painful, and a new person feels like the fastest way to stop the pain. But here's what happens if you give yourself time. If you resist the urge to rush into the next thing and actually sit with the discomfort, you start to rebuild. Not the old you, a completely new version. You start making decisions without needing someone's approval. You start enjoying your own company. You start noticing what you actually like, what you actually want, separate from anyone else's influence. You develop boundaries you never had before. You recognize red flags you used to ignore. You understand yourself in ways you never did when you were focused on maintaining a relationship. Divorce strips away everything you thought you knew about yourself. And while that's terrifying, it's also incredibly clarifying. You learn what you're capable of surviving. You learn what you actually need versus what you thought you needed. You learn the difference between loneliness and solitude. And slowly, painfully, you become someone who doesn't need a relationship to feel whole. Someone who chooses partnership instead of needing it. That's the transformation. That's the other side of divorce. Not happiness, not better than before, but integration, wholeness, self-knowledge. Look, divorce is brutal. There's no way around that. It dismantles your identity, disrupts your brain's wiring, challenges every assumption you had about love and partnership, and forces you to rebuild from the ground up. But here's the thing. People who go through it and come out the other side are some of the most psychologically resilient people you'll ever meet. Not because divorce made them stronger in some cliché way, but because they had no choice but to face themselves completely. No distractions, no illusions, just the raw truth of who they are and what they need. And that level of self-awareness, that's rare, that's powerful. Divorce doesn't make you damaged, it makes you real. So tell me, what's one thing you wish someone had told you before or during your divorce? What would have helped? Share it below. Your insight might save someone else from months of confusion. And if you found this valuable, share it with anyone navigating this. Sometimes just knowing the psychology behind what you're feeling makes it a little more bearable. Subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology of life transitions. I'll see you in the next one.